encountered people who frightened you, not because of what they did, because of what you recognized. Carl Jung spent 40 years on one observation about that recognition. Not that the monster in others is a warning, that the monster in others is a mirror. The thing you most fear in other people is already inside you. This is not a metaphor. It is the mechanism Jung called the shadow, the part of the psyche that was formed before you had the language to name it, buried before you had the capacity to examine it, and present in everything you have ever responded to with the specific quality of fear that feels more like recognition than warning. The question Jung never stopped asking, and never fully answered about himself, is not what the monster is. It is what you have been doing with it, for as long as you have been afraid of it. My guys, Jung's concept of the shadow begins with a simple observation about development. No person arrives at adulthood having expressed everything they contain. The process of becoming socialized, of learning what is acceptable, what is rewarded, what must be suppressed to maintain the relationships and the identity that the person requires, is also a process of selection. What is selected out does not disappear. It is relocated to the part of the psyche that Jung called the shadow, the repository of everything the person could not afford to be. The shadow is not evil in the conventional sense. It contains the aggression that could not be expressed, the desire that could not be acknowledged, the cruelty that exists in every person and was directed inward rather than outward, because outward expression was not survivable at the time of its formation. The specific content of the shadow is different for every person. What is universal is the mechanism. The shadow does not stay buried. It surfaces in dreams, in the quality of response to certain people, in the specific, disproportionate intensity of feeling toward qualities in others that cannot be explained by the qualities themselves. Jung documented this mechanism across decades of clinical work. His most important observation was about the nature of the response. When a person reacts to a quality in another person with an intensity that exceeds what the situation warrants, with contempt, with fury, with a fear that arrives before the rational mind has assessed the threat, they are not responding to the other person. They are responding to themselves. They have something I do not have. They express something I have controlled all my life. They are everything I have spent decades making sure I am not. The fear of the monster in others is the shadow recognizing itself from the outside, and everything you have ever done to avoid becoming the thing you fear has been done in the presence of something that was already there. Jung's most precise examination of how the shadow produces the fear of becoming the monster is in his concept of projection. The shadow cannot be seen directly. It has no face the person can look at and name. What it can do is cast. It projects its contents outward onto the available surfaces, other people, strangers, figures in the culture, and the person experiences these projections as perceptions. The person does not know they are looking at their own shadow. They know only that they see something in the other person that produces a response disproportionate to the evidence. The contempt is too immediate. The fear is too specific. The quality they see in the other person is not interesting. It is intolerable. That intolerability is the shadow's signature. This is Jung's first observation about the monster you fear. The monster is not out there. It is the part of you that has been externalized, placed in other people so that it can be experienced as external threat rather than internal content. The second pattern is the one that produces the specific fear of becoming. Research on moral outrage and disgust consistently produces a finding that is difficult to explain without the shadow framework. The people who respond most intensely to a particular form of wrongdoing, with the most visceral disgust, the most categorical condemnation, are statistically more likely to have the suppressed version of that behavior in their own history, not the expressed version, the version they buried. The intensity of the condemnation is proportional to the proximity of the shadow content. The closer the monster is to what the person actually contains, the more urgently it must be located outside. I would never do that. I am nothing like them. The fact that I can see it so clearly in them is proof that I am different from it. Jung's framework says the opposite. The clarity of the perception is the evidence of proximity. You can see it so clearly because you know exactly what it looks like from the inside. The third pattern closes the distance entirely. Think about the person in your life whose behavior has produced your most specific, most reliable moral response. The quality in them that you find most intolerable, that you have named, cataloged, returned to when you're thinking about them, that produces in you not just disapproval, but something that feels like a physical response. A tightening, a recoil, a need to place distance between yourself and what they represent. Now ask Jung's question. Where in your own history does that quality live? Not where you expressed it, where you suppressed it, where it was present and could not be afforded, where it went when it could not be expressed. The monster you fear most clearly is the monster you have been managing most carefully, and you know where the management began. Think about the quality in other people that produces your most intense response, not the most rational response. The most disproportionate one, the one that arrives before the assessment, that is already present before you have gathered enough evidence to justify its intensity. That quality is not in them. It is the projection surface for something in you that has no other way to be seen. I know what I'm responding to. I have good reasons for this response. I have seen this quality cause damage. My reaction is proportionate to the evidence. Jung's framework does not argue with the reasons. It asks one question beneath them. Why this quality? Of all the things a person can respond to, why does this specific quality produce this specific intensity? Why not something equally harmful, equally visible, equally documented in the people around you? Why this one? The answer Jung arrived at across decades of clinical work is the one that cannot be made comfortable. The quality that produces the most intense response is the quality most closely related to what the shadow contains. The monster you fear becoming is the monster you are most familiar with. Not because you have expressed it, because you have spent the most effort ensuring that you have not, because the effort required to not be it has been the defining structure of a significant portion of your life. I became who I am in opposition to that. My identity was built in response to what I saw in them and decided I would never be. I am defined by the distance between me and it. Jung's observation is that the distance is not what you think it is. The person who has spent the most effort constructing distance from a quality is the person who has that quality most available, not because the effort failed, because the effort was necessary. The thing you most fear in other people is already inside you. The question Jung spent his career asking is not whether you will become the monster. It is whether you are willing to look at what you have been calling fear and recognize it as something you have been carrying since before you had a name for it. Jung did not believe the shadow could be removed. He believed it was a permanent structure of the psyche, the necessary counterpart to the persona, the part that exists because the persona exists, holding everything the performed self cannot afford to carry. His framework does not offer elimination. It offers something he considered far more difficult and far more honest. Integration, not the integration of the expressed shadow, not the license to become what you have suppressed. The integration of the acknowledged shadow, the recognition that the content is yours, that the monster in the mirror has your face, and that the fear of becoming it is inseparable from the familiarity you have with what it would feel like. Jung's concept of shadow integration is not a therapeutic comfort. It does not resolve the presence of what the shadow contains. It changes the relationship to it. The person who has not integrated the shadow is controlled by it. It operates through projection, through the disproportionate response, through the construction of identity around what they are not. The person who has begun to integrate it is not free of it. They are in honest relationship with it. They know what they carry. They know where the monster lives. And they can no longer be ambushed by its presence in other people, because they have already looked at it in themselves. This is the only payoff Jung's framework offers, not the absence of the monster. The knowledge of where it lives, the specific knowledge that the quality you find most intolerable in others is the quality you have the most precise interior map of, because you built the map in the years you spent making sure you would never need to use it. You do not become the monster by failing to fight it. You become it by fighting it for so long that you can no longer tell where it ends and you begin. But the shadow does not only produce the fear of becoming, it produces something else that Jung documented with equal precision. The dark self that is not feared but hidden. Not the monster you are afraid of being. The version of yourself that you present to no one. That exists in the gap between who you are in every room you enter, and who you are when no room requires anything from you. Jung had a specific name for what lives in that gap, and a specific observation about what it does when it is never allowed into the light. The dark self you hide from everyone, that is next.